Let me start here. All right. Good morning. Well, now good afternoon, Tom. My name is Claudio. I'm calling you from Washington, D.C., from the studios in Fairfax City. We're very humble and grateful that Tom Brislin accepted our invitation to our show. Tom is an American keyboardist, songwriter, singer, producer, and writer. Tom has performed and recorded for several of the biggest names in the classic rock, including Yes, Meat Loaf, David Harry for Blondie. What about that? In 2019, joined the legendary Kansas as a group keyboardist, vocalist as well. And Tom, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Man, with everything what is going on right now with the pandemic, bands cannot tour anymore. How you manage to be at home, and uh, how it's affecting your creativity in many ways now that you cannot.
I look back at the year 2019 and I ask myself, how did I do it?
Yeah,
Joining Kansas, learning all that music, incredible music, and complex, deep music for this big show that we were doing all year.
yeah,
And then having this opportunity to write with the band for the album and to record the album. It's interesting that I guess for me, when the schedule is more dense, I just know what I'm supposed to do and I just get into it and I'm just working, working, working and not really thinking about it. It's times like these when we have to pause and all of a sudden it's like I'm given all this time. But now it's up to me to do what I can with it, with the limitations that we all have. So I've just tried to get down here and write every day and play every day. And I've got a lot of music ready to dig into, to develop into songs. And some of them could be for Kansas,
yeah.
for a future potential release. Some of them are a bit more pensive, a bit more of like what I did on my solo album, Hurry Up and Smell the Roses. And some are like modern rock. It's like I have so many influences that I just write first and then figure out what I got later and see if it can thrive somewhere.
I got you. Great. Thank you. Man, we can take this interview in so many directions. I mean, you have Yes, Meatloaf, David Harry, Renaissance, man, the CWD, Camel, John Anderson. Wow, man, what a background, man. So, but let's go back to the beginning. Were you born in a musical family, and how old were you when you began? I don't know, keyboard, maybe a piano. You did have a home, a piano at home, or a keyboard, or how everything started for you?
Music was a big, if not the central element of our home growing up. There's a piano in the house, and my siblings who are older than me,
Yeah.
they played music. Some of them played piano, some play guitar, and I was always exposed to music, and the piano was something I was always drawn to. So they started teaching me at a young age how to get around on the piano. And I think almost as importantly, I discovered their record collections and was just so fascinated by the record player and how it worked and got into all their music, which just so happened to be 70s rock. So that
Oh,
was
the
my
best stuff.
pedigree.
Yeah, the best stuff.
And then from there, it was like I was waiting for one of my sisters to hand me down her old FM clock radio and start searching for the stations. And that's when I started discovering the music of the day, early 80s for myself. And so there was always that influence of the 70s rock, which is the first music I remember really hearing and loving. And then the 80s music on the radio, that was the first music I discovered for myself. And that's always been a big part of what informs my musicianship. And I think that I was writing songs before I could even really read or play the music. I was drawing album covers and writing
Really?
song names. And yeah, because I loved the album jackets of all these
Sure.
bands and just learning
Yeah,
that there was this
yeah,
team of musicians, like
yeah.
a sports team. Everyone had their role, or a superhero team. They had their role. How does this affect a kid, you know? And I always refer back to that. And I started forming bands, a few years later, because I then eventually went to take piano lessons in town. And at the same time, I was trying to figure things out on my own by ear. And the writing was always another thing I found very, very interesting.
Were your parents supportive that, he's a little guy, listen to, his brother, sister record and drawing and, having the piano, we should put him in a piano lesson or something like that. Were you were supportive for that
Definitely. I provided hours of entertainment for the family.
Yeah, for free as well.
But yeah, no, they were really supportive and very interested all the way through, you know, when I started playing in bands and needed them to take me somewhere to go to a rehearsal or a jam session or even a gig, because I was starting to gig before I could drive. And it was, they were very helpful to me and they humored me, but they saw that I'm really fortunate that I had this sort of clear sense of purpose from a young age. I just had a feeling this is what I'm supposed to do with my life. And it's what I love to do. And it's what I kind of need to do.
Weird, but it was, so at the beginning, when you began forming your first band and you began playing in gigs and before you have your driver license, your parents saw that as a hobby, or at one point you told the parents, well, I want to go to college, but at the same time, you know, the music thing is very important to me. I want to give it a try. If it doesn't work out, I could go back to college and then, you know, put my life back together. What it was, you did have pressure to go to college, and like college is the only way, or, you know, you're not a professional musician, or, you know, how you make the decision, or
They didn't pressure me to go to college, but I guess life sort of did in a way. Everybody around me was planning on that, and I had the opportunity to do it. So it was kind of shown as a good future because we're a practical family, you know, pretty modest upbringing, and they just wanted to make sure that I would do all right. So they just, if anything, just reminded me to keep an open mind and keep my eyes open and be realistic. Because I mean, everybody in the world says you can't do music as a career. That's not realistic. You need to do something more realistic. But I see people doing it all the time. And why not me? If I worked hard enough and I followed through and used whatever talent I had and followed through on it to develop it and to show up. So I had this real mission to almost prove the naysayers wrong that you can, but that meant that I said yes to every possible gig that came my way, whether it paid or it didn't, and no matter what kind of music it was. Because one of my heroes is Herbie Hancock, and I remember him saying that he always strove to be a versatile musician, and so that word versatile always stuck in my head. And I thought, okay, well, I'll be versatile. I'll go play. I'll play at a restaurant. I'll play in a punk band. I'll play in a rock band. I'll play in a church. I'll play in a wedding band. And anytime the phone rang, I was ready to go. Even if I was out of my element, I would just do it.
Yeah. That's a big difference between you and other people that I have met or I interview. You have an inner calling. You were perseverant, you know, and you did wedding, you did dances, like you mentioned, whether they pay you or not, and your parents were supportive. That's a big difference, right? So, you know, if you hammer the piano or any instrument a lot, you know, and you take classes, formal classes, and you begin engaging with different older people like you, and eventually you will make it. Maybe you wouldn't make it to the level at where you are right now. You need to be very good. You know, it's very difficult. You need to have the self-discipline, the right element, the family engagement as well. But you need to be good, and you were good, man, as well. So,
Thank you.
you know, that's impressive. You remember the first band and that you formed? And
well, I don't know if we count the one where we were all 10 years old, but it was fun. We just, anybody who could play an instrument, even those who couldn't, just join the band, you know?
That's
if
right.
you could, I mean, some people were writing lyrics or coming up with ideas, and it was, you know, we were limited by the fact that some of us didn't even have instruments. We all had to come over to my house because that's where the piano was, and I didn't have a keyboard yet. And following, you know, and that lasted for a few weeks, and then it went away. And then a couple of years later, some of the same people, when we were 13, said, hey, let's get into this. Let's form a band. And then started reading the magazines with all the gear and all the interviews, and just from that point, from the time I was about 13 years old, there's been a straight trajectory to now. There's never been a break. I've always either been in a band, started a band, joined a band, worked on the next thing, wrote music, started getting into electronics and MIDI and going to all the workshops and anything that a music store would have. And it's just been one thing after another. There's been a straight trajectory.
You remember the first keyboard and the first vinyl record that you bought on your own? If you can.
Well, the first record that I remember hearing was the first Foreigner album. And maybe it's not the first one I heard, but it's the first one that I identified and checked out and listened to repeatedly and understood the songs and the band members and all that stuff. Yeah. But the first album that I bought with my own change was Men at Work, Business as Usual. I still remember riding my bike up to the store being, I don't know, 9 years old or something. You couldn't do that now. But we did a lot of things on our own back then.
Yeah, not anymore, man.
Yeah, and I remember purchasing the vinyl album, and of course, as soon as I put it on, I scratched it. It started skipping, but eventually I got another copy, and then when it came to keyboards, you know, my parents gave me a small portable keyboard for Christmas one year when I was about 11, and that definitely got me interested. But again, was about, I don't know, 13 years old, and I had saved up any money I could. I remember buying this Yamaha synthesizer, the DX27 was called, and it was a Yamaha synthesizer that mere mortals could afford, especially, you know, teenagers. And it was a complex, complicated, not a user-friendly instrument, but it made me explore. And since it was the only thing I had, I learned about synthesis, I learned about the terminology, and I figured it out how to start kind of creating my own sounds. Whether or not they were any good, I don't know, but it was something.
Yeah, so you save enough money to bear, but by the first one, then you continue earning a little bit of money, and you got the second one, and probably you first sold the first one, and then little by little, like everybody, right? So.
And it's always one other thing, right? You know, we then realize, oh, and if I'm going to be able to play this at band practice, I need an amplifier. So then there's the next thing, you know, got to go for. Now I start lusting after an amplifier, and it's that's how the gear lust starts, out of necessity.
Right. And then now if you go back, I will go back and forth for reasons that I will explain it there. And then your first concert took place with Meat Loaf, right? You were with Meat Loaf between 98 and 2001, right?
Yes.
How in the world you end up getting there? It's a big band. How you were paying your dues at the time, and
I it's interesting the way that the story unfolds, because while after I graduated from university, I was saying, okay, well, while I'm pursuing this path with an original rock band, which doesn't bring in income, what can I do around it? I could still play all those club dates and weddings and everything, but they would kind of compete for the same prime time slots on the weekends and things like that. So what could I do during the week? Okay, I can teach piano. And I actually have started teaching my friends piano when I was in high school. And so I liked doing that. So I started teaching lessons, and then some people heard about me through that, and the other gigs, and word of mouth would eventually lead me to joining Glenn Burtnick's band. And he's the popular New Jersey singer-songwriter, has written many hit songs, and was a member of Styx at one point. And he brought me on for his solo band. And I came in there with that. I was a sounds geek. So I wanted to recreate all the sounds on his album. And I don't think he was expecting that. So I think I got in good with Glenn, and we had a really good working relationship. And he used to host Christmas shows. He still does Christmas benefit shows where all different well-known singers and songwriters come to play a song. It's a big variety show. And eventually he referred me to Kazim Sultan, who was Meat Loaf's musical director at the time. And I got an audition when I was 24. So it was going from one group and just trying to do my best with that to the next. And I got the audition and got in Meat Loaf's band. And next thing you know, I have this huge television camera in my face, and we're doing the VH1 Storytellers special. That was my first performance with Meat Loaf, was on television.
Well, man, so now you your parent at the time decided, well, this guy's doing all right, you know, it's a big name band, you know, he hasn't got in trouble and he went incremental stages and you began working, making more money now, so you could afford better instrument and get a car or something.
Right. Yeah.
Man, unbelievable, man. And then, so the big break came when, so how, see what's happened is you have, okay, so now if I look back now, right, you have played with Yes, with Camel, you know, Kansas, man. I don't know what's the next step up, man, for you. Right?
I'm
Maybe Genesis, maybe you're replacing Tony Vance.
well, let me tell you, this is
Peter Gabriel. You know, you
it-
planned your stuff. I mean, when you were, uh, you wanna. I mean, you can play with a lot of, and they will. I know we'll touch the Kansas stuff, but you can. Eventually, you want to form your own band. You plan your stuff. My next step after Kansas, 2-3 years with Kansas. I want to record several records, and then the next I want to apply to go somewhere else, or it so happen.
the only things in my musical career that I've attempted to plan
Yeah.
are plans for my own music. I had a band called Spiraling. We were originally called You Were Spiraling, and we did a coast-to-coast tour supporting They Might Be Giants and Violent Femmes. And then we became Spiraling and got more of a refined, like sort of a power pop band. And my goals and my plans were really centered around that group because it was all my songwriting. I had the creative vision, but that also meant that I had to wear these other hats. You know, next thing you know, me and the band members are booking our own tours and sorting out our own hotels. So then I become a tour manager. I've become a record producer. I've become a publicist. That was all sort of centered around Spiraling being the passion and the original group thing. In the meantime, I was getting work, like I was mentioning with Glenn Burtnick or these other types of hired gigs. And what happened was those were sort of starting a parallel track of my career. So I would try to do my best with that and then come home and pour it all into my original work. And it worked out to a degree because I was a side person. You know, I was hired by Meat Loaf to play his music the way it was designed to be played. And I also did an album with him called Couldn't Have Said It Better. From there, Yes called and they said, we need someone for 1 year because Rick is going to come back in the following year. And I grew up loving Yes. They were my favorite band. And so I had to jump on that. And its temporary nature actually was something that suited me because my band knew that I would be coming back. And right after my time with Yes Symphonic on tour in 2001, after that, jumped right back into Spiraling. What happened is, once you play with Yes, prog rock people start to notice and prog rock bands start to notice, especially since the rumor had it that I got the Yes material ready in a relatively short amount of time. There wasn't a whole lot of time to work it out, maybe a month, I think, which, but I had to really knuckle down. I mean, this is Yes music. This isn't just playing a bar band gig. So that's when Camel needed somebody for their US leg of their, at the time was called the Farewell Tour. And they said, we don't have a lot of time to prepare. Tom to the rescue. So I jumped in on that and had a couple really memorable and shows with Camel, who I was admittedly not terribly familiar with them on an intimate level, so I had to really study up on what they were about pretty quickly. And then that was done. That was defined. Here's what we need for, and then it's going to end. So I was like kind of doing these things. And then jump right back into Spiraling, make another album, do another tour. So with Meat Loaf, with Yes, we'd play these beautiful venues. I'd be on the tour bus. We'd be going to Europe and doing all that stuff. And then I would come home and jump in the van and go play a club with Spiraling with a bill of 5 bands. I was just so determined to get our music out and try to get us somewhere with the group. And it's hard because in the 2000s, original rock, it was starting to decline. Record sales were starting to pull back. Labels were getting more nervous as a as it pertains to what kind of acts they were going to sign, and we were a little different. So it wasn't in the cards for Spiraling, but this reputation I started getting from the prog scene carried forward to the Sin and Francis Dunnery and Renaissance. Again, my role in Renaissance was to recreate the orchestra parts. Yeah. So that's what I did with them, and it was really fun and very interesting experience to be in orchestra. Yeah, yeah. So it all kind of ping pongs back and forth.
Yeah. So so I interviewed Annie Haslam like 2 months ago, and she was very nice and friendly. So how difficult was to audition and get the job with Jen? I mean, with Jess to begin with. How difficult it was, because you were 28 years old and
not even yet.
Good. Huh?
I wasn't even 28 yet when they called.
Oh, 26, and people assume, guys or girls will work a whole life, man, to get a gig with them. Never mind being a member for a year or whatever it happens. How was the audition? How did it go?
Well, the referral from some in the Meat Loaf camp, it gave a lot of weight, because I mean, Meat Loaf, you might not think of his music as progressive rock, but it is no joke, and it demands a lot of attention to play, because it's very and stamina too. It's very muscular music. You're just kind of Jerry Lee Lewis all night, but then the tempo stops and there's a pause, dramatic effect, and music changes gears. So in that sense, it does. Where should I start again?
So we were talking about how in the world you got the job with Jazz, how you auditioned for the job, how difficult to get the job, and you mentioned that coming from Meat Loaf obviously opened doors, right? So.
Yeah, because they had some trust that I would take care of business, because Meat Loaf's music demands a lot of attention to detail and preparation, and that's a lot of what goes into progressive rock. And also the sounds. I have to program the sounds, and sometimes musicians will have a person do that for them. I tried my best to get as close to it as possible, even before I got the gig, and show them that I was a multi-keyboardist, which is what Yes demands. Multi-keyboard, someone who understands not just piano, not just organ, not just synthesizers, but all of them. And so that referral and the trust that I got me to the point where they just wanted me to make a CD for them, playing 2 Yes songs. They would send me a live recording from their previous tour, and I would record myself on the left speaker and then their stuff on the right speaker, so they could just turn the balance and hear my isolated performance, and then they could bring the balance back to hear how I meshed with the band. Now I say there's 2 songs, right? But this is Yes. Yeah. So the 2 songs are Close to the Edge and The Gates of Delirium.
Man, that's 40 minutes.
That's 40 minutes of music.
Wow.
So, but I get it, because if you go for the jugular like they did, they know that if I could handle that, then I could handle anything else that they would require of me. And so I did that recording, and they liked the recording, and then I came out to visit them while they were recording the Magnification album. And that was a big part. That was the other part of the audition, was the hang. They had to see that I would mesh well with them on a personal level, since we'd be working together and living together on the road.
Plus they saw you, you are a songwriter and you have a very good voice. So they say, well, it's 3 for 1, because you brought more than just playing keyboard,
Once they learned that I was also a singer, then they had some fun with that, especially Chris Squire. He wanted me in on every harmony. Even if there weren't enough harmony parts to go around, he'd have me double his part. He just wanted, he was always about the lush vocals and that huge backing vocal sound. That was really a passion of Chris's. And so I had my hands full, literally, with the keys, and then had to sing backup at the same time.
And with John Anderson as well.
I know, and to hear my voice as I'm singing it, to hear it with John Anderson and Chris Squire surrounding me, I can't even explain that, but it was pretty incredible.
Yeah, my God, man. And you knew you knew that Rick Wakeman was coming back the year after or so, right? So you knew that this is only 1 week for 1 year, right? But
Yeah,
on the
so
back of your mind, you say, well, I'm getting paid good money, and this is one of the best band in the world, and that background and putting that in my resume, so to speak, would open a lot more doors. So you
yeah,
felt you needed to do it. You
and also to live in the moment as much as possible, and to take a notice of what I was experiencing, because even though, you know, luckily I had pro touring experience under my belt by that point, so there wasn't this shock. I wasn't starstruck or anything like that. I knew what the job entailed, and I was getting down to business. But there were some times when I was on stage and I was looking around and almost felt like I was in a virtual reality simulation, like, oh, Yes Simulator, like here's what it would be like. And I'm looking up and Alan White's over here and I'm looking over here and Steve Howe's there, and I look down and there's keyboards everywhere and I got to hit my marks. And to see John Anderson from this point of view, I still remember exactly how my stage vantage point was to sight lines to everyone in the band. So yeah, it was just I think the finite nature of that made me double my efforts to pay attention and to soak it all in.
you remember the first show you did with them, and were you nervous, like the night before, or?
I would say when it comes to me, all the nerves that I ever experience have to do with technical things. Like, is this keyboard malfunctioning? Is there something, you know what I mean? Like, is there a technical thing that's going to pop up that I have to fight? As long as I prepare musically, I feel like that I have control over. I can control how much preparation I do for a show. That doesn't mean it's a guarantee that everything will go off without a hitch, but there are the things that are out of my control. A sound problem. Would my ear monitors stop working? Because you're dealing with technology and you have to give it up and hope that it performs as it's supposed to. And also, I think one of the big things, especially since here we are, this is Yes music. It's very densely orchestrated, even before the orchestra is in there. And then the orchestra comes in, and now you have such a tremendous amount of sound to balance. And I just need to hear what's important for me to play the song effectively. And that's the thing that takes a little time, is to work with the sound engineer and say, okay, I need a little more of this, I need a little more of that. And it varies from song to song. So it's about feeling comfortable and being able to hear everything, because a rock and roll stage is not the optimal listening environment. There's sound everywhere. And we had plexiglass perspex separating the orchestra from the band. And it was a lot to handle. And then meanwhile, I'm like, okay, I got to make sure that I'm hitting it with Gates of Delirium or Go Close to the Edge. You cannot drift mentally for an instant, or else they leave you behind.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I believe that in that album, from the Symphonic Tour in 2001, that's one of the albums that end up getting jazz inducted to the Hall of Fame, right? The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Is that correct?
I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah, I think that was one of the albums that they mentioned that based on that work they end up in, I think, in 2017
Wow.
inducted, and that was one of the key. You were part of that album, man. Or that tour,
It was, and it was a fun experience. And speaking of the Hall of Fame, the Yes fans had their own celebration at the same weekend as the Hall of Fame induction, and I was there to play the solo set, and Patrick Moraz was there, and
Patrick Moraz,
yeah. So it's like a lot of the alumni were shown the love by the fans. So that's one great thing. The Yes fan community has been really supportive of everything I've done since.
Gotcha. And then after that year, you went back to your own spiraling band, right?
Yeah, we released an album called Transmitter.
Yep.
And that was really me pouring everything into that endeavor.
Spiraling is still exists. I mean, it's a parallel.
We never officially retired, yeah. But we stopped performing regularly in 2008. Again, it's not easy for an independent band if you need to catch some breaks. And I'm proud of what we did. We got to see some things that not a lot of bands get to experience. We played in Japan, we played all over the United States. We've had, thousands of people hear our music. So that was the victory there, but it was time for everyone to move on and to see what the next chapter would be.
Yeah, so you move into better thing. What happened with the other guys? They end up, any of them?
They're all doing well. I mean, in the worlds of jazz, some rock band stuff, and soundtrack music. I mean, this is a talented group. So, yeah, everyone's keeping busy.
That's great. Tell me about your collaboration with the Renaissance and Annie Haslam. And
again, I think that was a type of thing where my name started coming up from multiple sources. Annie would speak to Patrick Moraz or Jordan Rudess, or I think maybe even Larry Fast. And this name, Tom Brislin, she said was coming up in the conversation. So she said, maybe I should give him a call since this name is appearing. And I think there were a few different plans for the Renaissance reunion in 2009. And the one that ultimately came to pass was the one where I would be the orchestra, and Annie and Michael Dunford would be there, along with some other musicians who were from my neck of the woods, New York, New Jersey area.
Yeah, good. And then Camel came after that, right?
No, Camel was actually in 2003.
I'm sorry, yeah.
Shortly after, it was not that far after Yes. And then Renaissance, I joined for 2009.
Gotcha. And then you began collaborating with for Anderson and Stolt band as well. And John Anderson knew you from, the 2001 days with Yes. So I assume that he knew your background and everything, right?
Yeah, but it was actually Roine Stolt who got me into it, because Spiraling and Flower Kings had performed on several progressive rock festivals together. And so we developed a friendship. In fact, when Roine was touring with Transatlantic in 2001, they all came to see Yes in Frankfurt, I believe it was. And so that's early on is when I met those guys. But years later, we started to develop a friendship and a kinship musically. So when Roine started working with John, he thought it would be a good idea, and John was into it. So they brought me over. I went to Sweden to record my keyboard tracks for that. And years later, I would work with Roine and Jonas Reingold, the bassist, again with See Within.
Yeah, that's another band, unbelievable. I downloaded, I think I went to Bandcamp last night or the day before, and I end up, I think you have two CDs there. The Transmitter for Spiraling and Hurry Up and Smell the Roses. And they're very good, man. I like, there's a couple of songs that, I wonder if you can mention or elaborate a little bit. The Industry in the Distance from Hurry Up and Smell the Roses. How that song came together?
Yeah, that song is very special to me, and I think it really encapsulates my experience of creating that album. Because after Spiraling folded, I wanted to get a fresh perspective, try a new city, and try to get away from the trappings and distractions of the life that I was living at the time. And I always had this sort of fantasy of making an album where I play everything or almost everything on it. And so I moved to Nashville in 2010 and started writing this album. And Nashville's a songwriter town, and I started befriending and witnessing the great care and craftsmanship that these songwriters take in their songs. So it made me focus on lyrics more and really be clear about what I wanted to express. And next thing you know, I'm in my own world making this album. And wouldn't you know it, of course, some of the songs have to do with isolation.
That's right.
Because that was the condition that I just set for myself. And Industry in the Distance, it has a lot to do with, it seems like everywhere I live, there's always like a train or a highway or something not far away where it almost sounds like the ocean in the background. And I felt like no matter where I am in the world, there's something consistent. And that was sort of the impetus for writing Industry in the Distance.
How many albums have you done with Spiraling altogether?
We did 2 albums as Spiraling. Time Travel Made Easy was the last one. And then we did an EP before Time Travel Made Easy and after Transmitter called Challenging Stage, which was almost a live in the studio kind of thing where we just threw down 4 songs and didn't fuss too much about it. We just wanted to get sort of an immediate sound. Prior to Transmitter, when we were called You Were Spiraling, we released a 3 CDs on our own, but they were very modest productions. And the first one, You Were Spiraling, was something I was doing when I was 19 in college, and it was a tremendous learning curve. I mean, it wasn't even really ready to come out, but we were that was in the mid 90s when it was such a novelty that an independent band could make their own CD. Because it used to think, oh, I could only put out a record or something if I was on a label. You needed that sort of permission, that approval of a major label or a big indie or something. But this was like, you could take your fate into your own hands. And so we did, and we learned the ropes, and we were onto something. And I still have fondness for some of the material we did. We did also a CD called the Hello CD, and something called Delusions of Grandeur, which was all demos, which would lead to Transmitter. So it's a tough question. It's a long answer, I know. It's like, because Spiraling released 2 albums and an EP, and You Were Spiraling released 3 albums.
And then, do you sell a lot? Do you get decent money or any money at all from Bandcamp? I think I have heard with some people that it's very good. It's very decent, you know.
Yeah, well, it's no secret that record sales are not what they used to be. They're just a piece of the puzzle. Yeah. And my album, Hurry Up and Smell the Roses, is almost 8 years old now. And so it had a good run, and it's time, and people are still discovering it. And I think the music still has value, and I still want more and more people to hear it. But I realize I look at what I've done since then. I said, okay, I did the Anderson Stolt, and I did the See Within and the Kansas. And, you know, I've been busy, but the stuff that I have on Bandcamp is all catalog stuff. And so, but thanks to my work with Kansas, there's a whole new community that's discovering my story and my history. So they've been really supportive. And so I've been getting that out there. But yeah, I think we're all trying to figure out what the path is for musicians in the modern age of streaming and that sort of thing. So it's more of a discovery engine, and developing a more personal relationship with the audience than it used to be.
Yeah. I noticed also, I think, what's the application Stage It, that I get emails that you did some live streaming as well, right?
Yes, I did a performance on Stage It to benefit the Bob Moog Foundation, and it was part of a series. And because of the COVID situation, I hadn't done any performing since March 6th or 7th, I think it was. And I didn't want to do something like just from this black box in my home, you know. I like to perform, you know, but that's kind of cool too. I see some people just playing their hearts out from home, and I enjoy it. But for me, I was not sure if that's what I want to do. So they found a theater for me nearby where I could be the only one in the place, save for the camera operators. And they had this beautiful Fazioli grand piano. And I brought my Moog synth and just performed 2 shows in there for Stage It. So I guess
how many people attended, as far as you know, attended that, pay the fee that you need to pay?
I don't recall the numbers, but it's a good audience, and it's a good size audience, definitely worthwhile.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
I also think it was cool because they always have like a chat going at the side, so there's this like community interaction. And it's also silent, so people can focus on the music if they want to and not be disturbed by somebody who's chatting during the show.
Is that recording somewhere that people can listen to? Or like
not yet, but I do have the footage. So I am considering putting out an official release, properly mixed, for more to see.
Yeah, quite sure. Yeah, it would be interesting to see it. And then in 2017, you go from the supergroup, man, the See Within, which has so many good musicians, man. How that came together, man?
Again, I think that Royna Stolt and Jonas Reingold were kind of the drivers of that idea. And so they were the ones that were seeking the different musicians throughout the world to be a part of this. And there was talk of it becoming like a full-time band sort of thing, but everybody in the group has so many things going on that it sort of took on more of the project flavor. But we did want to have a group sound, and we had a lot of contributors as well that made it more diverse sounding. And we performed 3 times. We performed at Night of the Prague in Germany in 2018. And then we did 2 performances on Cruise to the Edge in 2019. And that's been it so far. But I could see we could be back for something else in the future. Who knows? I mean, we just sort of like kind of see which way life is flowing, and it could happen. I know that everyone's got their they're knee deep in so many other projects right now.
Yeah. I really liked it, man. I mean, I do have the album, like, not the album, the CD. I buy a lot of stuff, so I really like it. I listened to the stuff last night again. I like the sound at all. I mean, of course, there yourself and the other guys for Porcupine Tree, Flying Colors, and Steve Haggett's and big names. So it was very, very good. And is any plan to do another album down the road, or?
Well, like I said, it's possible. The door is open.
Yeah.
But we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, I got you. And then in 2018, Cans announced that you were coming to join the band. How did it happen? That of course.
A lot of it had to do with that performance with the Sea Within at Night of the Prague. The president of our label was there, and Kansas is a label mate of the Sea Within on Inside Out Music. So when they had a need, I got a lovely referral from Thomas Weber, the president of Inside Out. So you should check out Tom Brislin. I just saw him play, and I think he would be a good fit. So Phil Ehart gave me the call, and they asked me to join based on what they checked out my work, and they saw what Thomas had to say. So I was asked to join the band. And going back to the very beginning of this interview, we were talking about what's next. The difference with Kansas is that I'm from the get-go, I'm a full band member.
This is the first time, right?
Yeah, for those other groups, it was a collaborative thing, but it was a hired thing. It was a touring thing, or a touring and recording thing. Yep. Except for the Sea Within, of course, that was a partnership. But in this regard, Kansas said, we want you to be a band member, and that included the writing opportunities.
And I listened to the stuff, the whole album last night. I was preparing to the interview. Somehow, I'm sorry, my ignorance, I thought, because I follow so many bands, man, I thought that Kansas was down a while ago, and as people retire and they're only 1 member or 2 member or whatever, it wouldn't be Kansas anymore, right? I was biased. And when I listened to this album last night, preparing for the interview, and trying not to take my vibes into consideration, I felt that that's real Kansas. I mean, it's not, if nobody have said that, well, that's 20 years after, and a lot of people have left the band, without taking the time to consideration, I can go back and say, man, this could be an album from, 210, 212, the best day of Kansas, if you will. I mean, it's very good stuff. Plus the other thing, you have 6 lyrics, several part of music, as if it's Tom and Kansas. You're honorary member for life, man.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
It's more than honorary, they say, we want you to be a part of this and be a part of the Kansas story, be a part of the Kansas sound. And I got to work, and I saw the opportunities for lyrics that are vibing and that they like.
Yeah.
I could maybe get 1 or 2 songs. Next thing you know, they just kept showing the green light saying, yeah, we like it. Go. What do you got next?
Keep on going. Yeah.
Yeah. And then there were a few songs that I had written the music for as well. So I was making demos in between our concerts.
Yeah.
And they were so welcoming. And I had to do my homework too, because I wanted it. Obviously, it was going to sound like me because it's my ideas, but it also, I wanted it to be Kansas. And so luckily I'd been already immersed in Kansas music to a deep degree because I was learning it for the show.
Yeah.
Point of No Return was swimming in my head while I was writing these other songs. And I didn't want to copy anything, but the spirit, the flavor, I definitely had in my mind while I was writing this stuff.
And then, so when the pandemic is over, we're hoping, you guys will tour for the new album, but you plan, hard, difficult question to ask. Do you plan to stay with them for, it's up to you to stay them for a while, and then, if, based on your ambition, what's the next goal? Although you never put goals when you were 19 or 80 years old, right? So now you have the option. Now you have options. They will say, well, I can go this way. I can form my own band, go back to whatever, Peter Gabriel, Genesis, whoever call you after this. And what's it?
Yeah, the funny thing is that if we had continued in 2020, it wouldn't have been long before I could say that I've played more shows with Kansas than I had with any other band.
Right.
Because we were working so much.
Yeah.
So far I've done about, I don't know, maybe 95 concerts or something like that with the group and the album. Yeah. So in a short amount of time, I've have more to show for my career with Kansas than any other of the side person touring groups. And Spiraling had, obviously we had the output with, and that it was come from me and my own album, but I'm talking about in terms of pure volume of body of work. Here it is. So in a way, I still feel like I'm just getting started. So my goals are, I want to get more Kansas going. I want to see what we do next. The veterans of the band do not want to stop anytime soon. They're dying to get back on the road, and so am I. Yeah. So we have more ground to cover.
But for you personally, assuming 2 years from now, right? You have done another 100 gigs with Kansas. You have like a goal to go somewhere else or play with another, or
I'm not thinking about that, but I will say this: today's music industry is such that there are these opportunities where you could do a side album. I could do a solo album on the side or do another project on the side, because the days of being locked in have changed, because the record industry isn't the same. If it was the 70s or the 80s, I would be, locked into, this is what you're doing. And it would be, okay, you got to get us the next record. You got to get on the road. There would be no other time. There would be no time for anything else. Whereas in today's landscape, we could do the album with Kansas, we do the tour dates with Kansas, and I could be on the laptop writing new music. And the way I've approached it in 2020, and also in what little of this year we've had so far, I'm just writing and recording my ideas. And then when I crack those open, which I'm starting to, and I say, okay, oh, this sounds like a Kansas thing. Right. Here we go, put it over there. Oh, this sounds like a solo thing. Okay, put it over here. So at the end of the day, I'm going to find out what I've got and where it needs to go. And there are avenues to explore and to put those things out while still staying committed and making Kansas my focus and my priority.
Yeah, that's beautiful that you can put the music away without worrying the time you wrote it, that where is it going to apply to Kansas, or like you say, do something as a trio with another, or do your own again.
And I've never looked at, because people have asked me that question, oh, who do you want to play with next? Who's group? And I don't think about that. And this isn't meant to sound like a boast, but more of just an odd fact that all of those groups, Meat Loaf, Yes, Camel, Renaissance, The Sin, Debbie Harry, and they all found their way to me. And I'm happy that the work spoke for itself and that my name got out there. But I wasn't like out there hitting the phone saying, "Get me in your band." You know, that wasn't my style. Maybe I could have or should have, I don't know, earlier on. But for me, when those calls weren't coming, I knew that my purpose was to create and to write music. So that's what I focused on when that stuff wasn't happening. And lo and behold, the calls would come.
Yeah. Is any particular group or musician out there that you would like to play? Do, you know, not necessarily join the band, but do some work together?
Oh yeah, collaborations. I mean, that, of course. I mean, I still want to do more with John Anderson. I want to do something with Steve Hackett. You know, I want to do something with these great musicians who I've known and worked with.
Yeah.
And or heck, Colin Hay from Men at Work is still my favorite singer. Love to have something with him in my lifetime, because that's just, I hear his voice and it's always inspiring to me.
Yeah, I interview, I think my second or third, I don't remember, I need to look at the computer, was with Steve Hackett. He's a very nice person, and you know, all the British guys are very different. And after that, I did Anthony Phillip. Anthony Phillip left Genesis, and then Peter, and Steve Hackett got the gig, and very good people, man. Very, you know, good people. So, what about Peter Gabriel? You like the music?
Oh, sure, of course, yeah. Let's get them all. Of course.
Well, now you know. Now you can be selective. You know, you have to yourself.
Right.
You in your background, you have, you know, I have this, I have that. You have moved incremental stages. People keep on calling you, man. You haven't called anybody, so that's good, man.
Let's get Peter Gabriel. Let's get Sting. Let's get The Weeknd. I mean, he sells millions of albums, so that would be fun.
I'm going to. I do know a guy who can put me in touch with David Sancious.
Oh yeah, and he's a Jersey guy like me too.
Yeah,
so, I've worked with some people, especially
you met him. Do you know him?
I've never known him, but I love his playing, and I will say that when I worked with Francis Dunnery, he worked with David Sancious a lot. So some of the music I was working with him was in the David Sancious style of playing.
Yeah, I got you. What kind of music do you listen to when you're not composing at home, or when you're cooking, or doing laundry or whatever you do?
I still listen to a lot of jazz.
Yes, yeah.
And the classics, of course, Wayne Shorter and Miles Davis and Coltrane, and a lot of the 60s stuff I still go for. I listen to a lot of soundtracks.
What kind of stuff?
I enjoy that soundtrack composition, anywhere from the classic John Williams scores to Junkie XL or Atticus Ross and Trent Reznor. I just love hearing what can be done in that context. And you can be so adventurous musically and still reach a wide audience. Yeah,
a lot of people like yourself that do piano and keyboards, and they end up doing electronic music, and they take the kind of soundtrack path as well as a parallel career.
Yeah, and I like the funky stuff. I like a lot of the newer, mindful funk fusion stuff like Snarky Puppy, and but also just like the classic groovers, from the 70s and stuff. That's always enjoyable to me. Do you like Jean-Luc Ponty? Yeah, of course. I interviewed him a couple of days ago, 3-4 days. He was very nice too, man. Plus, he was a hero of mine. There are two people that when I was growing up in South America, I thought that, man, if I see Jean-Luc Ponty once and the Pan Metheny group once, I will be happy with the rest of my life. Because remember, at the time, in the 80s, bands were not going to South America, right? Mm-hmm. So I was going crazy. Now everybody goes to Latin America at the time. So for me, it was very important to move here to the United States. And I did all right in my life. I got lucky along the way, and I did all right. And now I have seen Ponty 20 times, Pan Metheny like 10 times, and I have thousands of records on CD. And so I fulfilled my dream. And I now interview Ponty, and I want to interview Pan Metheny now. So I interviewed the drummer, Paul Warticosta. So excellent.
I've been little by little, man. Where are your for the weather, are your plans for the near future? I mean, we don't know with the pandemic, but hopefully you guys will tour with Kansas again and go on the road, and then we play. Is there any particular venue that you like better than others here in the United States?
Venues, oh, there's so many good ones, and a lot of times it's about the people that I meet in these places. I have fond memories of venues in Texas, California, here in New Jersey, in small towns. I don't have a preference, but there have been some really notable special places for me, like Radio City Music Hall in New York, or the Beacon Theater in New York. Growing up in the shadow of New York City, it definitely has a big effect on me to play in those legendary venues, or a venue we have here in New Jersey called the PNC Bank Arts Center. That's a place where I saw Yes, and where I saw Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and where I saw so many bands. So when I played there with Yes, it was a pretty great thrill. But places like the Hollywood Bowl or Red Rocks was a great one. I played there with Debbie Harry. And yeah, so I'm very grateful to play the places. But
do you know the Wolf Trap here?
Yes, yeah, we play Yes Symphonic.
It's beautiful. Many, yeah. There's so many. Like I mentioned at the beginning. There's so many. I'm very lucky because since I'm the border with 3 different states, with Maryland and DC, every band's come to this town, man. So I'm not going anywhere. I'm not moving.
Yeah.
Although I'm a computer engineer, this is my passion. This is my side job, my fun. And yeah, I wouldn't move from here. There's so many venues. Where can people can listen or buy your music? If you have anything posted on your website, or
yeah, the best place to learn about me is tombrislin.com, and I spell my name BRISLIN.com, and also tombrislin.bandcamp.com is where I sell my music. We have a store there, and kansasband.com will have updates on what we're up to.
Got you. And the last question: are there any new artists that I wouldn't know that you recommend that we should check out, and then invite them to the radio and perhaps set up interview with them?
Oh wow! You really should talk to Eric Levy from Night Ranger. He is a deep player.
I don't know him. Yeah.
Yeah,
you can later on. You can send me an email with some names.
Yeah, he's.
I'm always looking for new people, man.
Yeah, and he's someone who I enjoy watching on Instagram, even though it makes these like 1-minute clips of just improvising, and it's a new way of consuming music, and it can be fun sometimes. I listen to a lot of drummers that way too. I
got you. And then the other, like I mentioned to you, in the new electronic music radio, I'm going to be doing soundtrack, but I want to do not just to play the soundtrack. I'm interested in doing analysis of the music. A good example would be The Shining. That the director at the time hired folks to do the soundtrack, and the director didn't end up. Stanley Kubrick didn't use that. They hired somebody else, and then a film editor decided to put it together, and it's unbelievable. And then that kind of stuff. So not just uploaded the soundtrack, but do analysis of the music. I'm going to be interviewing Hans Zimmer too, from the UK. And
he's a favorite of mine as well.
The guy is unbelievable. I mean, some people are gifted. I mean, I don't know how, they're like you, right? One day you want to look back at your life, man. If you haven't already, and you tell your dad, when you were 10 to still, save enough money to buy your first keyboard, man, and going to college and with spiraling, and then look at now, man. Look at now. You can, I wouldn't be surprised if you end up replacing Tony Banks in Genesis, repeating with Peter Gabriel, man.
It's not my goal. I would rather hear him at Genesis. I want to listen to what he's up to. But I will say that you mentioned the film composers, and one thing that I noticed is that they still have this childlike enthusiasm about music. If you see Ludwig Göransson or Hans Zimmer, you see their interviews, and they're just like kids in a candy store. They're always exploring new things and listening for just something that tickles their fancy and can help elevate a film or a program. I like hearing from them and seeing their process. And I mean, one beautiful thing about progressive rock is that you can kind of think orchestrally in that way, because that to me is what prog rock should be and what it is to me, which is freedom. Freedom to make a song. If it needs to be 3 minutes, then make it 3 minutes. If it needs to be 12 minutes, make it 12 minutes. Just be honest, do it for the right reasons. You know, I'm not trying to, you know, show how fast I am on the keyboard or whatever. That's doesn't really last long for me. It's more about, I want to bring a feeling to the listener, and you know, have fun with it too. We can play as busy or as sparse as we want to, as long as it elevates the music and makes it a worthwhile listening experience.
And the last question: when you're not doing anything with music, or what you do for fun, what is fun for you when you're not working on? Cooking, gardening, going out, drinking beer.
No, you know, it's funny. You know, I go through phases where, you know, I collect old memorabilia or things,